that drum beat. You've heard it 1,000 times. But here's what you probably don't know. Only one person's voice is on that record, not three. One. The woman who sang it was trapped inside a mansion, surrounded by barbed wire, guard dogs, and a gold coffin her husband said he'd display her body in if she ever tried to leave. This is the real story behind the Wall of Sound. Before the hit record, the monster, and the coffin, we start where every great story starts. On the streets. Spanish Harlem. Late 1950s. 3 girls, 2 sisters and their cousin are singing in their grandmother's living room on Saturday nights. Veronica Bennett, Estelle Bennett, and Nedra Talley, mixed-race kids in a neighborhood that didn't always know what to do with them. Half black, half Irish, a little Cherokee, a little Puerto Rican. They called themselves half-breeds. Their word, not mine. They weren't polished. They weren't trained. But Veronica, who the world would come to know as Ronnie, had a voice that could stop traffic. Raw, emotional. Like she was singing directly to you and nobody else in the room. They started as the Darling Sisters. Won a talent show at the Apollo Theater. And by 1961, still teenagers. They talked their way into becoming go-go dancers at the Peppermint Lounge during the Twist craze. When acts didn't show up, they filled in. And people noticed. DJ Murray the K started booking them. They cut some records for Colpix as Ronnie and the Relatives. Flopped. Every single one. But Estelle, the older sister, she wasn't giving up. She picked up the phone and cold called the most powerful producer in America. His name was Phil Spector. And that phone call, it changed music forever. But it also set in motion something terrifying. We'll get there. Gold Star Studios, Hollywood, California. A room so small you could barely fit a drum kit in it. And Phil Spector crammed it with, and this is verified, multiple guitars. Multiple pianos, bass, drums, percussion, horns, saxophones, all playing at the same time. In one room, on purpose. Every other producer in America was trying to get clean recordings. Isolate every instrument. Keep it tight. Spector said no. He wanted chaos. Controlled chaos. Here's how it worked. He'd stack these musicians on top of each other, the Wrecking Crew. The greatest session players in LA, guys like Blaine on drums, Tommy Tedesco on guitar, Leon Russell on keys. Sometimes he'd have 3 guitars playing the exact same part. 2 pianos doing the same thing. Why? Because when all that sound bleeds together through overhead microphones in a tiny room, you don't hear individual instruments anymore. You hear a wall. But that wasn't even the secret weapon. Then he'd mix the whole thing down to mono, one single channel. Everything competing for the same space. And the only thing sitting on top of that wall, Ronnie's voice. Underneath Gold Star Studios was a basement echo chamber. Spector would take the blended signal from that packed room and pipe it down into the basement through speakers and microphones bouncing sound off the walls and then feed it back into the live room. So now you've got the original sound plus its own echo layered on top of itself. Over and over. That's what made it genius. The voice cuts through the wall like a spotlight through fog. You can't ignore it. Every AM radio in America in 1963, tinny little speakers, car radios, transistor radios, it sounded huge on all of them. That was the whole point. He engineered it for the way people actually listened to music. Nobody had ever done that before. Nobody. Now, Phil Spector didn't build that wall for just any song. He built it for one specific recording. And the session that created it, it's one of the most legendary 4 hours in music history. July 5, 1963. Gold Star Studios. Phil Spector, songwriters Jeff Barry and Ellie Greenwich, arranger Jack Nietzsche, and engineer Larry Levine have assembled what might be the most talented group of musicians ever crammed into one room. And Blaine sits down behind a set of timpani and a snare drum. That, right there, that pattern. 4 hits. Maybe the most famous drum intro ever recorded. Blaine later said he wasn't even sure what he was going for. He was just trying to capture a heartbeat, your heartbeat when you see the person you love. Now here's a detail most people don't know. They didn't nail this in 1 take. Or 5. Or 20. The session ran approximately 4 hours. Spector was relentless. Take after take after take. Adjusting the echo. Changing the mic positions. Making musicians swap seats. The Wrecking Crew. These are guys who played on hundreds of hit records, and Spector was pushing even them to the edge. And when the instrumental track was finally done, Spector spent 3 more days on Ronnie's vocal. Just her, alone, in the booth. singing "Be My Baby" over and over until every breath, every syllable, every crack in her voice was exactly where Spector wanted it. And here's the thing that'll blow your mind. Estelle and Nedra, the other two Ronettes, they're not on the record, not a single note. All the background vocals were arranged separately. Only Ronnie's voice is on "Be My Baby." One voice. On top of a wall built by dozens of musicians. And it became the most perfect pop record of 1963. Shot to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. Sold over 2 million copies that year alone. But the person most affected by "Be My Baby" wasn't the public. It wasn't the radio DJs. It was a 21-year-old kid in Hawthorne, California, who heard it and pulled his car over to the side of the road. Brian Wilson was already a genius. The Beach Boys were selling millions of records. But when "Be My Baby" came through his car radio in the summer of '63, something broke inside him. Or maybe something opened. He pulled over, sat there, shaken. He later said he couldn't believe what he was hearing. The density, the emotion. The way Ronnie's voice floated over that impossible wall of sound. And then he did something kind of unhinged. He had his engineer, Steve Desper, make a tape loop of the "Be My Baby" chorus. Just the chorus. On repeat. And Brian Wilson sat in his studio and listened to that loop for 4 straight hours. Not studying it. Not taking notes. Just absorbing it. Like a trance. He listened to "Be My Baby" hundreds of times. Maybe thousands. And what came out the other side of that obsession? Pet sounds. The Beach Boys release what many consider the greatest album ever made, and the fingerprints of Phil Spector's wall of sound are all over it. The layered instrumentation. The unconventional instruments. The Wrecking Crew, the same session musicians from "Be My Baby", playing on nearly every track. Paul McCartney heard Pet sounds and said it inspired Sgt. Pepper's. So if you trace it back, "Be My Baby" didn't just change pop music. It set off a chain reaction. The Ronettes, to the Beach Boys, to the Beatles. One drumbeat rippled through the entire decade. So that's the legacy. Beautiful, right? Inspirational. But now we have to talk about the part of this story that isn't beautiful at all. Because the man who built the wall of sound, he built another kind of wall too. And this one had barbed wire on top. Phil Spector married Ronnie Bennett in 1968. She was 25, he was 28. And almost immediately, the fairy tale ended. What I'm about to describe comes from Ronnie's own words, her 1990 autobiography. "Be My Baby: How I Survived Mascara, Miniskirts, and Madness." This isn't rumor. This isn't tabloid gossip. This is what she lived. Phil Spector surrounded their mansion with barbed wire and guard dogs. Not to keep people out. To keep Ronnie in. He confiscated her shoes, all of them, so she couldn't walk out the door. He installed an intercom system so he could listen to her in every room. She was allowed to leave the house once a month, for essentials, and if she was gone longer than 20 minutes, he sent a bodyguard to find her. He kept a gold coffin in the basement. Glass top. And he told Ronnie to her face that if she ever tried to leave, he would kill her and display her body inside it. She lost her career. She lost her voice, literally. At one point, the screaming and threats had become so constant that Ronnie went mute. Couldn't speak. The voice that had floated over the wall of sound, silenced. Her mother finally told her, "We gotta get out of here, or you, my little girl, are going to be gone." And one day in the early 1970s, Ronnie Spector walked out of that mansion. No shoes. Barefoot. She walked to a divorce attorney's office and never went back. The divorce settlement was brutal. Phil forced her to sign away her future record earnings. She walked away with $25,000, 5 years of alimony, and a used car. He kept custody of their adopted twins, but she walked away alive. Now, this next part is important, because the story of "Be My Baby" doesn't end with Phil Spector in a mansion. It ends with everyone who stole from it. And I mean everyone. Once the wall of sound was out in the world, everybody wanted a piece of it. Billy Joel's "Say Goodbye to Hollywood" 1976. Listen to it. That's the wall of sound. Joel admitted it openly. He called it a direct homage. Bruce Springsteen. Born to Run, 1975. Springsteen told his producer John Landau he wanted to make a record that sounded like Phil Spector producing Bob Dylan. That entire album is built on the wall of sound foundation. The Jesus and Mary chain built their entire aesthetic on distortion and feedback walls inspired by Spector. The Ramones hired Spector himself to produce End of the Century. Amy Winehouse's Back to Black, The title track is a love letter to 1960s girl group production. To the Wall, to Ronnie. And here's the thing that gets me. For decades, Phil Spector got the credit. Spector's Wall of Sound. Spector's masterpiece. Spector's genius. But the voice that made it a masterpiece instead of just a technique. That was a teenage girl from Spanish Harlem who had to escape barefoot just to tell her own story. Ronnie Spector rebuilt her career. She performed for decades. She was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2007. She passed away in January 2022. At 78 years old, and Be My Baby, her record, her voice, her heartbeat is in the Library of Congress. Preserved forever. Phil Spector died in prison in 2021, convicted of murder. A different story, for a different day. The Wall of Sound was built by a genius and a monster. But the thing that made it immortal, that was all Ronnie. If this story hit you the way it hit me, drop a comment and tell me, is Be My Baby the greatest pop record ever made? I want to hear your take. And if you're new here, we go deep on the untold stories behind the legends every single week. Hit subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.